Hey, good morning, LA aliens. It's Friday, one of the last Fridays in the summer. Although you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it. I mean, I'm of an age where you didn't start school in the fall until after Labor Day. And now I see these poor little suckers being crammed into school buses before Labor Day. And I guess they're banking days in case we have a snow day and we have to cancel. The roads are hazardous to travel on. I don't know. Assumption of risk that used to be part of living, but now we go into global panics at the drop of a hat. And it seems to me that the season of panic is upon us again. You know, I saw a story yesterday, passed it on to Mike. Kentucky, a school district in Kentucky has closed the school. Why? Well, kids are sniffling. They've got COVID. They've got this. They've got that. We talked about a college in Atlanta engaging in precautions. Earlier in the week, Alex Jones broke a story that he'd seen federal papers suggesting that there is work underway to prepare for another lockdown in the fall. When I first heard that, I scoffed and I thought that's just drawing too much of an inference from a small piece of data. But now the data is beginning to accumulate, and lawyers here, at least in Connecticut, several of us were talking yesterday. What are we going to do if the courts get canceled again, if the courts get closed? You know, it's taken all this time, 3+ years, for the courts to kind of hit their stride. And as we go into the fall of 2023, and at least in Connecticut, courts follow an academic year schedule. The new term, so to speak, begins after Labor Day. People are locked, loaded, and ready to go. You know, I've got a backlog of murder trials to try. I've got 9 of them, and I'm trying to tee most of them up to get them done this year. Well, not this year, in the next year, meaning in the next court year, in the next 10, 12 months. But if the courts close again, clients are going to be sitting. There are going to be speedy trial issues. Clients are going to be unhappy. I don't know, Mike, what's going on down your neck of the woods? I'm beginning to fear the return of Covidtopia. And before I get to that, last time around, we were all caught by surprise by it. Lawyers and states asserted bold executive powers, and we had to scramble to come up with legal doctrines to oppose them. Lots of litigation, mixed results, generally favoring the government. This time around, we don't have an excuse. It's coming, and it's time to get those writs ready. It's time to take a look, if you're a state law practitioner, at what's going on with respect to the limitation of state emergency powers. If you're a federal practitioner, it's time to really reread Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the 1905 decision that the federal courts relied on to give states sweeping power under federal law, and realize that Jacobson dodged the fundamental issue. The courts were so busy, so overwhelmed, they never asked was it possible that Jacobson was applied in an era after incorporation of the Bill of Rights as against the states. And that issue is still unaddressed. We're trying to get it in front of the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, in a number of cases that are percolating through the federal appellate system. But people, get ready, because Covidtopia, I suspect, is returning. I'm hearing a lot of reports from people anecdotally, and I see some written. People don't want to return to work. Companies are shuttering because they can't get people to come into the office. Employees are resistant to return to office work. They've gotten habituated to working at home in their jammies. Another round of COVID is just going to increase these decentralizing pressures in the workforce, and it's going to disrupt the supply chain. It's going to yield inflationary pressures. It's going to shutter public institutions. And this is where I start to think maybe I am a conspiracy theorist and I just don't know it. Is it any coincidence that we're doing this on the cusp of the 2024 election? Get those absentee ballots out, folks. It's too dangerous to go to the polling place.
Yeah, I mean, this is we started the week with the story about Morris Brown College canceling classes for 2 weeks and implementing mask mandates, distancing, contact tracing, etc. And we noted in that stream, Norm, that there were no confirmed cases of COVID that compelled that policy. There weren't any students who had confirmed cases of COVID. They were merely third-party reports that people had certain ailments and or illnesses that looked or sounded or could be attributed to something like COVID, which calls into question, I think, one big issue, which is there are reports of some variant of COVID that has emerged. And there have been several people who watch and listen to this stream, one in particular that has stated that COVID is now endemic, that being a medical term referring to something that circulates within a population and will be with us ad infinitum.
Forever.
Right.
Yeah.
And no different from the common cold, no different from the flu, things like strep throat. These are all endemic to our daily life. And, we all grew up with an understanding that you get sick, the best thing to do is, have a healthy immune system, and, you'll be down for a little bit and then you'll be back up. We have somehow lost touch with that basic understanding of public health over the last several years. And it has a lot to do with the consolidation of executive power within non-medical professionals in government, governors in particular, and the likes of what I'm going to put on the screen right here. Dr. Mandy Cohen. You asked what's going on in North Carolina. Nothing is going on in particular in North Carolina quite yet. I do expect that something will happen, but I think that something broader will happen, and I'll get to that in a moment. But recall that Dr. Mandy Cohen was who led North Carolina's coronavirus response team in league with Governor Roy Cooper, who right now is, publishing videos calling everybody racist on his way out of his gubernatorial seat, and is widely regarded as having a negative approval rating at this point. Dr. Mandy Cohen was appointed by the Biden administration following all of her faux pas as the new director of the CDC. So at a federal level, I can tell you from personal experience that you have someone that is a follower, that is not at all going to lead first with competence or some appreciation for what we may have learned through this. She is going to do what she is instructed to do from a government position. That I can tell you that unequivocally, that she is not going to do anything that will give you any sense or confidence that she appreciates individual sovereignty, freedom, and medical choice. I can promise you that.
Where's Robert Kennedy? I would have expected to be beating the drum loudly this week. Where's he at? I haven't heard much from him.
I don't know. I haven't actually checked to see what he's been saying, but that's something we can follow up on. But here's where I wanted to go with this, because I think you were actually teasing this out. So for all of our viewers and listeners, there's the Maine Policy Institute has produced what it calls a scorecard, or a scoring. They've scored emergency executive power in all 50 states, and they've updated. So they now have a 2023 edition of this emergency governance scorecard. And what they do is they score every state's laws regarding a governor or executive's authority to initiate and control a state of emergency from a legislative perspective, or from a
there's Connecticut, about as authoritarian as it gets.
And so I do urge everybody watching to go to this. And I'll put the website's URL on both YouTube and Rumble. I'll put it on YouTube right now so that people can go. But go and learn. So for example, I'll just hover over North Carolina here. What it does is it says, all right, so who may declare a state of emergency in your state? And it tells us here that in North Carolina made pretty substantial and sweeping changes following COVID in 2021. But that was, they had to negotiate before the conservative supermajority in the legislature. They had to tie this to the state budget in order to get this through. But and you can see the rating there is a 66 out of 100. So I think we're 8th overall in the country in terms of on a ranking, 100 being I guess your purest form of liberty safeguards, and 0 being, I guess, a mark.
Connecticut, real quick. I want to see what the iron lung of
Look at me with my map. Look how quickly I went to you on the map. I needed to point that out. I feel like other people would have struggled with that, and you won't admit it, but you know I'm right. Anyway, Connecticut, state of emergency can be declared by your governor only, but within 3 days, some sort of joint committee can disapprove and nullify it. And then it has to be terminated by that same thing. But your time limit is 6 months, not as in North Carolina, 30 days, right?
Well, it's 6 months with a liberal extension, and that joint committee in Connecticut, it's basically a uniparty state. It's all Democrats on both sides of the aisle. So the committee just gets together and says, "How high shall we jump, Mr. Governor?" And
you've tied for 45th overall. So good job, Connecticut. You guys are crushing it there. North Carolina, I think it says we're tied for 12th, but what that means, I think there's 4 states that are basically tied for 8th, I think is what that equals to. So anyway,
well, let's keep an eye on
the legislature has given themselves pretty good authority to rebut. And that's why it's important, I think, for everybody to kind of go to whatever state you're in. If it's Florida, you can see Florida, we have Governor DeSantis, making on the campaign trail, talking about how well they did in COVID, except, in the absence of a conservative governor, it looks as though the state of Florida is not as liberty-minded as it gets credit for.
Hey, click on Vermont up there, my alter ego state, the state where I spend as much time as humanly possible. Is that the most liberty-loving state or what?
Yeah, you're ranked last. That's amazing. So you rank literally 50th out of all 50 states. So emergency can only be declared by the governor, can only be terminated by the governor, and there's no time limit.
Yeah, well, wow. What are you going to do?
Right.
Well, keep an eye on it. I mean, I think I do think that there's going to be a series of COVID restrictions. I predict by late September, once the schools get going and runny noses become endemic or become everybody's got a runny nose. There's going to be an instinct to want to cower and take cover again. And I think it's time to start pushing back now. And I think if you're a lawyer, take a look at your state constitution and begin to conceive of a state constitutional attack. Read Massachusetts.
And in addition to that, I think, Norm, just as an example here in North Carolina, we had a racetrack that successfully enjoined COVID enforcement policies. It took a lot of doing. But from a constitutional basis, North Carolina has what's known as the fruits of their labor clause. So with respect to business closures and lockdowns, there are ways for you to look at your constitutions and see what sorts of constitutional guarantees and authorizations are given by and through your state's charter, right? And look for that. Don't look to the federal government. This is all going to originate locally.
I think so. Then let's get ready for the fight. Hey, let's pivot. So somebody asked me this morning as I was driving in. It was Vinny Penn. I do a Friday morning spot on his radio show here in Connecticut. And he says, you see a guy this weekend in the store and he's got a T-shirt on and he's wearing Donald Trump's mugshot. Do you assume that he is a supporter or do you assume that he is an antagonist of Trump? And I'm not going to tell you my answer. What would your answer be, Mike?
Supporter, for sure.
Well, I'll tell you mine now. I said both. I said, people are going to, Donald Trump remains this sort of iconic figure in American politics as reflected in the astounding. I started to watch his interview with Tucker last night. And, I'm sort of trying to put myself in a post-Trump frame of mind because I'm just so tired of hearing about the guy. But as I watched him, I liked him more and more. I mean, he's just gritty. He doesn't want to hear about it.
Did you love his joke, the Ada Hutchinson joke? How much did you love that when you heard it?
If you, to be honest with you, this is how much of a dolt I am, Mike. Had you not told me it was coming, I might have missed it and not gotten it.
Oh, man, I thought that was killer, man.
Tell it to everyone because I think it's pretty cool.
So I think I said it on the stream either yesterday or the day before. Yeah, it had to be yesterday. So it's Asa Hutchinson, who is the governor of Arkansas running for president of the United States right now. And he appeared on the debate stage the other night, and when asked about Asa Hutchinson, or really asked in general about the other opponents, Trump referred to Asa Hutchinson as Ada Hutchinson. He said, "I call him Ada Hutchinson," and Tucker said, "Well, why do you call him Ada?" He said, "I don't think I can go into that, but it's an obvious reference to ADA, ADA, because it's ASA is his real name, but ADA is the acronym for the Americans with Disabilities Act." So I just thought it was such a clever way to call him a name and then not have to explain it, and leave it to I guess the more clever among us to pick it up. I thought it was great.
Well, you did. I didn't. Trump changed defense counsel in Georgia yesterday.
Sure
did he
did.
dump the $1 billion lawyer, or what happened here?
Don, look, Trump used complete sentences in the interview. Admit it.
Well, he did. He was better than I thought. I've grown cynical, about Trump, and I'm tired of hearing about him. I think he's divisive in ways that don't help, and I'm looking to the post-Trump world. But as I said moments ago, as I watched him with Tucker, I thought, he's all there. He's sentient. He's got a sense of humor. He's got a sense of priorities. And he did use complete sentences, Dawn. But he didn't ask people to crank up the mail-in ballots as the most secure of all methods. Not yet, anyhow. That would be Biden's script. But what's up with the change in counsel in Georgia?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this. I think I floated a theory to you yesterday when news of this broke. Let me get this off the screen. But so I'll just read here. Fulton County, former President Donald Trump has replaced the leading member of his legal teams hours before his surrender at the Fulton County jail Thursday. Trump has hired attorney Steve Sato to replace Drew Findling, who is leaving the team, sources told ABC News. Sato, pardon my pronunciation, has represented several high-profile clients, including Usher, Rick Ross, Ray Lewis, and T.I. Most recently, Sato represented Atlanta rapper Gunna in the YSL RICO indictment, with the rapper agreeing to an offer.
Well, that may explain that. So he's got familiar with the Fannie Willis game with Rico down there, and that he may bring some superior traction to the team.
Well, but recall Findling was the same sort of profile, Norm. Findling was the hire he made, where I think we profiled him here on the stream, and I said that I kind of like this. I like that he's using somebody that is high profile in the criminal defense world, can bring some sort of brand to this. And it appears that, and better than me, Norm, but I'm assuming that not every criminal defense attorney is created equal, and that's not a lofty assumption to make. But I think that what I mean is each criminal defense attorney has his or her core set of competencies, or those tricks, or those items that they are most confident in. And I can, from that, assume also that perhaps bond hearings or figuring out how to get through to reduce some of those preliminary items within that criminal defense checklist that an attorney is going to have to go through with their client is one of those areas that certain criminal defense attorneys can excel. Am I right in saying that, to some degree, that perhaps Findling was who Trump needed for the initial part of this, to have his bond set in an amount that wasn't extraordinarily unreasonable or submit to any other items related to his arrest, and then he pivots to somebody who might have a competency in, I guess, the initial motion practice to come with RICO?
I don't know. That seems to attribute more forethought to the process than a personality like Trump, I think, warrants. I think, at the heart of the attorney-client relationship is the relationship between the attorney and client. And under the rules of professional conduct, a lawyer is required to be his client's zealous advocate to the exclusion of the world. You are to avoid conflicts, or if there are potential conflicts, advise the client of them and obtain his informed consent to a waiver of those conflicts. Then, you are to be a zealous advocate for the client. The rules of professional conduct, that is the ethical rules that govern lawyers, changed in my lifetime, probably before you came out as a lawyer. It used to be that the rules of professional conduct were steeped in what I call the captain of the ship model.
I thought you were going to say honor and dignity and.
No. Lawyers, what do you want to happen? You'd say to your client, and the client would say, I want X or Y. And then the lawyer had strategic freedom to accomplish those, or tactical freedom to accomplish those strategic goals. Along about 15, 20 years ago, various states in the model rules adopted an informed consent model. And so now lawyers are required to consult with their client, not just for strategic direction, but about tactical objections and tactical means of accomplishing those objectives. And the result is that you're required to spend more time with your clients. That's not always a good thing. Especially with a client like Donald Trump, who is imperious, headstrong, and thinks he knows best on just about everything. And so my hunch is that Trump will cycle through a set of lawyers, and by the time he gets to trial, he will have 2 or 3 more teams, because there's Donald's way or the highway. And every lawyer getting involved in a case thinks that they are possessed of the ability to lend order to the chaos that is the client's life. And once the client picked them, therefore, you assume the client's going to follow their recommendations. Along the way, you learn that most clients follow, especially a client like Trump marches to his own drummer, and then tensions emerge between the lawyer and client. You see this with Trump and the J6 lawyer down in Florida. Trump's talking about getting rid of the judge, and the lawyer's saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. He will be gone. I thought he would be gone by now. He will be gone likely within 30 to 60 days. So I think what's happened is the romance is off between Trump and the prior counsel. He's got a new guy. I don't think that Trump sits back and says, I need a middle closer, I need a closer, I need a starting pitcher, and I'm going to change my rotation depending on the inning. I just don't think he thinks that way. I think that he's in the moment, and some lawyers serve the moment, and then some, and then when that moment is passed, Trump needs another lawyer if the lawyer's not willing to go with him. So I think it's more personality driven. Trump is not always wrong. I'm not saying he's always wrong, Pat. I'm simply saying that he's a handful, and a client who is volcanic in that way is just going to cycle through lawyers. In our office, for example, it's not at all uncommon to be the 4th or 5th lawyer in a case, and it's become an office joke. Somebody will come in. I remember one guy came in once years ago. He had a problem with the FTC and Federal Trade Commission, and wanted us to try to get his case in front of the Supreme Court. We had to go to the Federal Appellate Court in Washington, D.C. And we were talking. He says, I've gone through 9 lawyers and $4 million in legal fees. And I said, stop right there. Let me guess. You're broke now. He said, yes. I said, that's the story of my life. And everybody spends their money elsewhere and then says, come on in and try to clean it up. So I think that I think, Freedom Lever says, write it down. We'll see how Norm's prediction works out.
Well, so let me add a dimension to this, Norm, because I think we can be a little binary here with respect to sort of speculating on the strategy. I think we should focus the spotlight on Fani Willis there in Fulton County, and just acknowledge that there are now reports circulating of her potential involvement romantically, sexually, perhaps, with members of the Afro-referenced gang YSL, who Trump's current and newly appointed attorney represented Gunna on his Alford plea agreement. I've seen several pictures online, and that is a legitimate conversation that these Atlanta-based rappers, Young Thug was another one, part of the YSL gang. I think he's been convicted. Young Thug was represented by the attorney that Donald Trump just fired in favor of the new attorney, and Gunna is represented by his current attorney. This is a very culturally specific and relevant issue to that Atlanta sort of that Atlanta subculture of hip hop, rap, and then law enforcement, and especially considering Fani Willis has a direct proximity to some of these more A-list celebrities now. There is potentially a strategy here that Trump could have happened into or intentionally deployed. We don't know. And again, this is just my opinion, but it could be that Trump is applying pressure, because Dawn says this, which I like. Trump's strategy: push your opponents to the point of insanity and then act like the normal one. I think that what may be the case here is that, the normal procedure and application of criminal law may sort of be the afterthought here. Perhaps Trump is attempting to play mind games with Fani Willis by getting as close as possible to people who the internet is now drawing links to, right? Whether direct or rumored, because that delegitimizes her credibility in the public consciousness, which is that's the war that Trump is waging largely on his campaign trail, right? Is the perceived lack of legitimacy of these prosecutions. And so I think that this may be high ground for him. And we don't even have to talk about the procedural or the substantive issues attendant right now to the RICO charges and everything else. I just think that this substitution, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye if one is not necessarily, I guess, attuned to modern rap.
You ascribe a lot more foresight and strategic acumen to Donald Trump than I do. I think that he's a willful, narcissistic whirlwind who doesn't get used to taking no. It can't get used to taking no for an answer. And if you've got a lawyer long enough, that lawyer is going to start telling you no to some of the things you want. You didn't end up in criminal trouble by mistake. It wasn't. You didn't win the lottery and get a ticket. And as the principal defendant, your conduct drew questions. Now the questions may be illegitimate, but tactically, how you address them is going to require wisdom and is going to require some forethought. And any lawyer is going to say no to a client, and if the lawyer didn't want to hear it, he's going to get himself a new lawyer. The client rather doesn't want to hear it. He's going to get himself a new lawyer. What up with SpaceX and Elon?
So I think this might tie everything together for us here, Norm. One item that I didn't really get to talk about on the within that subject of emerging COVID restrictions and lockdowns is my belief, and this is a real conspiracy theory if I've ever had one. So I will go ahead and own up to that. But I don't think it's impractical or too far of a connection to make.
Well, let's hear it.
The public is largely aware now that masking in particular is ineffective. And in fact, we could go so far the other way as to talk about the maleffects of masking and certain other conditions that develop as a result of recycling bad air with your own body. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that road. But by and large, we say masking ineffective against the transmission of the COVID virus. We also know that the social distancing protocols were completely arbitrary and made up. These things have been walked back for a while. And what that means for me is that if we have the story now that the Department of Justice is launching a major employment discrimination lawsuit against SpaceX, whose founder happens to also be the owner, the principal, the chairman, and head honcho of the most relevant social media platform on the planet, now named X, formerly Twitter, and which also has been very public in peeling back the layers of state coercion and involvement in censorship in prior elections and in censorship of certain personalities on the platform. Masking is effective in the car alone with the windows up for sure. Yep.
Oh yeah, I always mask up. Yeah, in the car with the windows up, especially when I'm talking on the cell phone, because I don't want to infect the phone, because the phone might transmit the virus to someone.
Norm, there is my level of respect for someone like Michael Jordan, and then right above that is the instantaneous respect earned by people I see masked with their windows up in their cars by themselves. I mean, it's just like, anyway. So where I was going with this is to say, I think that X as a platform has a major stress test incoming. And what I mean by that is information related to health, personal health, was a huge battleground by and through this first round of COVID. And I believe strongly and strenuously now that because Elon is from outside of this controlled network of social media, right? That it is possible that this coming election is going to see a platform like X subjected to heretofore unprecedented, we'll call it discrediting from the whole of media and other social media companies. And I also think that this lawsuit is going to be used as an ad hominem attack on its leadership and Elon Musk as part of that.
The lawsuit. Here's the lawsuit. We haven't even talked about the basis of the claim. The claim is that Elon doesn't want to hire illegal immigrants or people who aren't documented in the United States, aren't green cards, and therefore the Justice Department has sued him for employment discrimination. And if anything should make Elon a national hero, it might be just that. I mean, at a point where we have an immigration crisis and people flocking into the country and cities unable to provide services, and various federal laws that require people to determine the citizenship status of their employees, Elon's being fired in effect for not creating a sanctuary employment. He's being prosecuted for not being a sanctuary employer. I don't know if Elon's going to embrace that. Candidly, I haven't looked at the suit yet, but I am aware of the fact that you're supposed to check your employees' immigration status. And so I don't know quite what to make of the lawsuit, given the requirement that you check their status. You're here illegally? Well, I'm not going to hire you. And now suddenly you get sued by the Justice Department? That's just bizarre.
So I looked into this a little bit. Here, I'll put the complaint on the screen so that we don't have to guess at what's in the complaint, and I will skip down to the bottom here in just a moment. But pay close attention to where this lawsuit is filed. It's in the Office of the Chief Administrative Hearing Officer. So for all of those that are hearing, Glenn Lassiter, great to see you. Excellent attorney here in North Carolina. Love working with Glenn. And
even when he's throwing up into his mask at inflationary pressures and food prices.
Like Pat says he's going to wear one on his forehead. And then Donna's reporting this: Trump back on X last night. Is that true? Somebody needs to kind of confirm.
Dawn is very reliable. I mean, I'm sure it must.
Yeah, I've missed that this morning. Anyway, the office, an Office of Administrative Hearings is going to be an interesting venue through which this is going to be litigated. I wasn't immediately able to get onto the government's website and search up this case. I'm also not sure of how to get there buy-in through Pacer. So I'll have to work a little harder at figuring out, because we don't see a case number here. This complaint is drawn directly from the Department of Justice's website. Right. So in order to access this, so what I'm really interested in is being able to monitor the answer to this, perhaps any preliminary motions that SpaceX brings. And what's interesting for all of those that are still confused as to what the legal issue is, SpaceX deals in what we call under federal law export controllable stuff, right? I mean, it's a space company. It obviously has certain technologies and access to military information, and it is held to a standard quite separate and apart and different and elevated from the normal day-to-day business practices of, say, I don't know, a bakery or a logistics business, just a national logistics business, that kind of thing. And to that end, they must, in certain circumstances, get approval in order to hire U.S. persons, at least in their opinion, that are not citizens or naturalized. And so we have a situation where there is the definition of U.S. persons and then foreign persons. And this complaint hinges on SpaceX's alleged policy of not wanting to hire at all, not even consider, not on a merit basis, just on a designation basis, that SpaceX refused to hire and explicitly stated that a certain class of people not apply. And that class of people, you might ask, is asylees and refugees to the United States. And what it said is that federal law prohibits them from doing that. Now, what I have learned is that the bodies of law that apply here might afford SpaceX and anybody taking advantage of this who is sort of balancing Title VII and also federal law around export controls, because there's a weird intersection there, because there's a national defense interest at the core of that, right? And anybody who's doing that can certainly apply for a approval through the agencies that oversee those two respective bodies of law. What I don't know is what that process looks like, Norm. And I
don't know why the Justice Department is suing him on this basis without preliminary inquiries. I mean, this looks like a further weaponization of the Justice Department. When I saw the suit, I thought there's another reason to like Vivek. When you're out there trimming the fat, if you should get close to power, Vivek, trim some of the fat heads out of the Justice Department.
Well, and we can end on this. I did want to at least say, okay, well, so what? What's the lawsuit over? This is where they're saying to me, because I haven't seen in the article I pulled up that explored sort of the parallel nature of Title VII with export controls. The cited cases had very nominal damages and a promise to change the policy and maybe a monitoring process for a couple of years thereafter from the DOJ, because apparently this subject is something of interest to the DOJ. These requests for relief are wild to me. So there is the obvious number one is to cease and desist from what they call illegal practices. But then they're also asking SpaceX to pay a civil penalty, to provide consideration to each applicant identified as an refugee, but was improper.
A one-way trip on a rocket.
Get this, to hire the applicants who were victims of the discriminatory practices, to pay back pay, including interest and all other relief to everybody discriminated against, and anything else that the judge might require. But consider that this does not seem at all about writing what appears to me from a reasonable onlooker a legitimate position on a body of law by SpaceX as a company applied consistently across probably close to 9, almost 10 years now. And it could have been as simple as the DOJ saying, hello, that interpretation is incorrect. If you need some sort of expedited approval process by and through these two respective agencies, we're happy to facilitate. Please do that. Now, it might come out through discovery that indeed was the case, but from where I'm sitting, in order to benefit, because we don't have any individual complainants here, this is the Department of Justice bringing the lawsuit, right? This isn't an employment discrimination claim brought again on behalf of a class of aggrieved plaintiffs, right? Asylees and or refugees. These are just, this is something the DOJ brought on its own. So I'm really curious to figure out if the DOJ is playing heavy-handed because of the theory that I advanced a few minutes ago, right? That this is another front in the war against.
I used to feel sorry for Merrick Garland because his Supreme Court nomination wasn't acted upon, in the waning days of the Obama administration. But when I watch the Justice Department these days, I feel like the town drunk is in charge of it. I mean, you've got this half-ass, theory of overreaching in damages. You've got the Proud Boys case where they're seeking a terrorism enhancement on their sentences because in order to get a terrorism enhancement under the sentencing guidelines, you have to meet a statutory criteria. Destruction of property is the one they've claimed. So basically, a $32,000 fence was destroyed in the riot on January 6th. The result of this is, in the Justice Department's view, these men are terrorists. The other statutory predicates involve such things as using a weapon of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, downing an airplane, assassinating a federal official. When the people at the Justice Department can't tell the difference between that and destruction of a fence en route to the Capitol, or they come up with this sort of death strike at Elon Musk on very, very thin grounds, I begin to think that maybe it's Garland's responsibility. He's the guy, he's the attorney general, and maybe he's just out of control and unhinged,
I agree. I think that, and most of our viewers would agree as well. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. I think it's just, this is absolutely what draws me into listening very carefully and closely to Vivek. And it's because he has articulated a vision for how to disembowel the
creep state.
Yes.
Not the deep state, the creep state.
It's insane, this bureaucratic bloat. And I do think that this is in the midst of a competency crisis. So some of this can be perceived as intentional because it's in human nature to try and identify threats and ameliorate those or mitigate them entirely. And that often manifests as an outward threat, but it's also stupidity. It's also ignorance. It's all just plain incompetence can lead in mass to this cumulative effect that we're feeling about, like, man, I think I was saying yesterday that I've been so conditioned to a standard of customer service that is so bad that I now am, I'm like a battered wife, as it were, when I get good hospitality or customer service, right? I just I don't even know where I am. And it's weird that we're in that phase, especially in the South, right? But I think that speaks to the larger issues that we're having in America. So we talk about inflated food prices and prices of fuel and whatever else, mortgages, da 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 da. Those micro interactions that we have with one another every day become even more salient and I think harmful when you're able to observe sort of that incompetency in action. And when the timing of this lawsuit, just to tie it up against SpaceX, is just really, SpaceX represents something about the future of American innovation that we don't have in any other sector of our society. I mean, other than what?
So let's drag it down, push it into the mud so that we are all unhappy, and then we'll own nothing and be happy about it, because we'll all
just, does it seem that, I think that's where that skepticism comes from, is that why is it that the Federal Department of Justice is making a spectacle of employment practices of a company that has earned its way into its position, and there's plenty of documentation on that, right?
Yeah, no, SpaceX creates something. Justice does what? You know, hey, photography. I want to hawk somebody. You say, is there not a single attorney or group of attorneys that can battle this nonsense? Take a look at We the Patriots USA Incorporated. We the Patriots USA Incorporated, an organization co-led by a man named Brian Festus. I mean, in the interest of full disclosure, they retain me from time to time to help in litigation of this
and
sort.
We posted Brian Festus on the podcast, I think some time ago.
A while ago. But if you're looking photography, you know, for lawyers, or you want to contribute or help support an organization that's looking for lawyers to fight this kind of nonsense, that'd be a good place to start. So there we are.
Yeah. Well, look, I put our X page on the screen here, just to tell people what it looks like when they go to follow us. We are 11 followers away from our 500 follower goal.
Get it done today, people. We need 11 more, please.
I think we could get it done today with relative ease. So please follow us at LawPod Daily on X. And if you already do, just share it somewhere else. Share it on your Facebook or on your Gab or on your Telegram or on your Truth or wherever. Bring somebody else to the club and let them know that when they follow us, it's not just another thing they're following. If they do get interested in watching the stream, we absolutely stream live from our X page every day. We also stream live from Rumble Video, YouTube Live, and we also upload the audio only of every morning's stream to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find podcasts. So if you come to us that way, leave us 5 stars and or a nice comment, or what, Norm? Leave us alone,
or
right?
leave us alone. Hey, Julian Toll, thank you. Huge fan in Sydney, Australia. Love the show. Spread the word. We want to be popular down under.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of scared of Australia now. I'm just kidding. I'm not scared. Anyway, yeah, Julian, thank you very much. I think I recognized that comment earlier. Always love to see where we're being streamed. And on that note, I was looking at some statistics. I think yesterday or the day before. At least 70% of you watching on YouTube are not subscribed. What are you doing?
Yeah, really. Day trippers. Come on.
Yeah. Subscribe. Just hit the button. All right. Anyway, Norm, happy Friday. I know you and I will talk. Some of you will be getting emails about what? Law
and Legitimacy.
That's right. So be on the lookout for those over the weekend. That's all I've got. Norm, we'll talk again over the weekend and then see everybody else on Monday.
Ciao. Remember, listen up. The future begins here. It's yours. Grab it.
See you later.
Bye.